Chapter 712. Bojo arched a brow. He wasn't their captain during the competition. Indeed, it wasn't him. Chinemo tilted his head, glancing at the person. He is their former captain, Raorong. Former captain. Didn't that mean he had retired? Bojo glanced over. Someone whose name the Almighty remembered had to be skilled. I'm back. He smiled at Lin Chentao. I'm back again. It was just a few words, but it had a deep meaning. This was another arrangement by the production crew. Some people said that in the esports industry, there were only 3 people that could be considered the soul of a team. Supreme Alliance's Chinemo, Xiangnan's Almighty Xiao, and this person Raorong. In reality, he was facing the same problem as Yin Wuyao. Older players would have to retire from the competition. This was the decision of the club and the investors. Some people felt that the current team was strong enough, and it would be better to bring in some fresh blood than to keep the veterans. That was the competition with Supreme Alliance. They were suddenly struck with a realization. They had to get Raorong back. Without him, they might lose in the future competitions. Of course, at the start, no one had been able to contact Raorong. Only Lin Chentao. As a fanboy, he had been writing letters to his captain. Everyone in the alliance knew. Lin Chentao had been waiting for someone to return. And now, it was finally a success. Of course, it wasn't a good thing for the other teams. Raorong's godly skills were still around. Welcome back. Just 3 words. Raorong broke into a smile. The next second he turned towards Chinemo, his lips lifting slightly. Have I been away from the industry for too long? You actually came to participate in a variety show. Chinemo stuffed his hands into his pockets, remaining silent. Lin Chentao wiped his reddened eyes, speaking in a serious tone. Captain, listen to me, the iceberg Chinemo has been acting strangely recently. The production crew allowed them some time to catch up. Almost a minute later, the cameraman lifted his camera once again. However, in this 1 minute, Bojo felt that the aura emanating from the Almighty was clearly different from before. Was it because of Raorong? At this moment, all the cameras were in position. The recording of the program continued. Alright, the mission has been activated. After the members of the battle team have completed the first mission, they will be able to activate their respective energy spheres. Now, please check your team's mission. The first 2 teams were quite normal. It was a common guessing game that tested tacit understanding in variety shows. But it was different for Bojo. She must have taken the wrong mission card. Mouth to mouth for 3 seconds. Separated by a piece of paper. What kind of situation was this? The storyboard director was puzzled when she saw the card's contents. He immediately turned around and looked at the director, who had arrived late because he was drunk. The director was very serious and expressionless. He couldn't possibly tell his subordinates that he was drunk by his old classmate, and didn't know what mission he had changed, could he? The storyboard director wanted to discuss if they should change the mission since Almighty Chin didn't like to be so intimate with anyone. Chinemo had already taken the mission card from the youngster's hand, his voice calm as he asked the person beside him, "Where's the paper?" Chapter 713. The storyboard director wasn't the only one shocked. Even the main director widened his eyes in disbelief. Boss Chin had actually agreed to the mission instead of freezing him with his gaze. This time, all the drowsiness and hangovers were gone. When the main director had first seen Chinemo, Feng Yi had brought him over. Feng Yi had been the one who had brought him over. At that time, the main director had been too eager for talent. With such a handsome face, he should be filming. Hence, he hadn't even asked about his background. Stop gaming and join my crew, I'll make you famous. At that time, the youngster who was sitting on the chair had only tilted his head and lit a cigarette, his tone unhurried. I invested in the drama you are currently filming. The main director. Even now, he could still remember Boss Chin's gaze. He had been a high school student back then, but why had he been so imposing? In conclusion, it was because of his good looks and money. But because of that gaze, the main director had always felt that Chinemo was the perfect male lead in his script. And now he had actually agreed to such a mission. The main director was agitated. He was directing the filming personally. They were treating this scene as a kissing scene. Wait a minute. Bojo smiled faintly. Brother Emo, we aren't suited for such a mission, right? Chin Emo arched a brow. Why? Do you think I'm taking advantage of you? I'm afraid your fans will say I'm taking advantage of you. That's easy, I'll take the initiative. Chin Emo lowered his head and pressed Bojo against the coconut tree fiercely. It looked like they were about to kiss. The girls in the filming crew blushed. As CP fans, they were on the verge of screaming. Lin Chuntao stood at the side in a daze. Once again, he secretly confirmed with someone. This really isn't a gay show. The cameraman had forgotten to adjust the long view, standing there in a daze. That wasn't how the script was supposed to be, right? Under the camera. Bojo glanced up. His face was already very close to hers. His deep gaze seemed indifferent as he turned and whispered into her ear. How can we end the mission quickly if we can't complete it? His words struck a chord in Bojo's heart. Before her rebirth, she had always liked to be in nightclubs. He was no stranger to this kind of gameplay. This was his favorite way to heat up the atmosphere while drinking. It was the same when he played Truth or Dare. In addition, foreign countries were more open than domestic ones. But when Bojo played, she was always with the girls. Let her and the Almighty, Bojo was still thinking. The man in front of him had already lowered his head. First he stuck the piece of paper on her face, then kissed her lips. Chin Emo seemed to always be like this. He acted as if there was no one else around. Like a demon deacon walking out of a comic book. Indifferent, cold, yet so handsome that it could cause the surrounding people to scream. Some of the girls in the program team couldn't help but cover their mouths. This was probably the first time Almighty Chin kissed someone in front of everyone. Although it was separated by a piece of paper. But that kind of pose was enough for fans to fantasize about for a long time. Since she wasn't prepared, Bojo stilled. The breath was very familiar. And it did not belong to her. It was slightly cold and invasive. She could even feel his tongue sweeping across the seam of her lips, because their lips were stuck together. It was a vicious blow. Chapter 7:14. Perhaps it wasn't obvious from the camera. But the storyboard director was so close, it didn't seem any different from a real kiss. Bojo wanted to retreat, but the camera reminded her that if she retreated and dropped the paper, she would have to do it all over again. It would be easier to do it in one go. She had to maintain the position for 3 seconds. Bojo watched the handsome face that was inches away from her. When the Almighty turned, his eyelashes brushed past her face like feathers, tickling her heart. Her mind seemed to have been sucked dry, blanking out. All that was left was the sound of her heartbeat. 1 second, 2 seconds, 3 seconds. It wasn't easy for her to endure the 3 seconds. Bojo pulled herself away, her fair and clean face not flushed, still carrying her usual suaveness. However, her gaze was sluggish. Chin Emo glanced at the youngster, a gentle and intoxicating smile on his face, his voice casual. The taste isn't bad. The storyboard director. Taste. Ah. Her nose was bleeding. Why was she so agitated? Calm down. The Almighty was just saying it. It was mainly because of the taste. The Almighty had added such ambiguous lines. Was he trying to send the fans into a frenzy? The main director was pleased, nodding repeatedly. Good, the expression and lines are on point. Director Wong, this isn't a movie, the assistant reminded softly. The main director's expression changed instantly, turning solemn. The expression isn't bad, don't edit this scene, it would be perfect for a variety show. Lin Chuntao stood beside them and watched. He then turned around and glared at the cameraman. The cameraman glanced upwards. This time, he didn't have the confidence to say that they weren't a gay show anymore. Chin Emo didn't look any different from usual. After leaving the youngster with the piece of paper, he looked at the camera. His cold and abstinent temperament didn't change. He was high and mighty, but it was hard to dislike him. I've completed this mission. What about the next one? The storyboard director coughed heavily, reminding everyone to focus. It was weird, they had filmed celebrities kissing before, so why were they so easily aroused in front of Almighty Chin? No, they had to hold back. Collecting love. This time, Rao Rong was the one to announce the mission. His voice was very pleasant, low and magnetic with a hint of laughter. You must be very hungry. Now in front of you are the mangoes and coconuts that the old farmers bought wholesale from the market. Help the old grandpas sell these things and you will be able to eat lunch. Hearing this, the guests had different expressions on their faces. Sales. Bojo arched a brow. Zhao Samping was very serious. There's no need to sell them. I'll eat them all. Tower, hurry up and buy them all for me. I don't have money. My SIM card and bag were confiscated by the production team. Did you forget? Lin Chuntao was still roasting. Fatty, we're enemies now. Do you know what that means? Little Spade, come here. Let's discuss how to sell coconuts with our looks. F***CK. What happened to being enemies? Zhao Samping. Don't fight with me for Little Spade. The storyboard director. Split into 3 groups. The quality of the lunch will be decided based on the amount of money sold by each group. This sentence was shouted by the director with a loudspeaker. Chapter 7:15. Brother Mo, on the other side, the youngster had already escaped while the two of them were still bickering. With a hint of mischief in his handsomeness, he said, "Let's hurry up and pick a cart that's easy to push. There aren't enough customers here. It's not suitable for selling coconuts." The cameraman cleverly recorded the youngster's words on camera. Both of them were men of action. There was no sound at all. When Lin Chuntao finally won the argument, he turned around with a smug look on his face. Pinch. Rao Rong watched his expression, rubbing his temples. You haven't changed at all. After saying that, he smiled and said, "Let's go, selling things is more important." Zhao Samping jumped up to Xiao Shun and said with a serious face, "Captain, do you think they'll buy all my coconuts if I play a game for them later? When you go shopping and see someone playing games, will you still buy it?" Deity Zhao's aura turned cold. Zhao Samping's eyes lit up. Of course not. Crew, looks like his IQ is still there. I will fight with him. The production crew. Xiao Deity held his forehead. Shut up. Every team had their own unique characteristics. Perhaps this was the reason why they were invited to join the cast. Even director Wang, who often made shows, felt that this show was really interesting. Although the guests were following the script, they were not stiff at all. The storyboard director glanced at the main director. Director Wang, are you sure they're following the script? The camera turned to Supreme Alliance, who was the first to leave. He could vaguely hear the youth's clear voice. Hello, excuse me, where is the nearest tourist attraction nearby? The scene zoomed in with the sound. Bojo was asking for directions. The other party was 2 girls dressed like students. They were probably here to travel. They parked their bicycles by the roadside and were about to take out money to buy Coke. When they saw the handsome young man who suddenly appeared in front of them, they couldn't help but be stunned. This is too handsome, ah. The cameraman could clearly see the blush on the girls' faces. There was also a small voice that responded. If you walk this way, you'll reach the scenic beach. Thank you. Bojo smiled. Then, she seemed to have thought of something. If you guys are thirsty, do you want to buy a coconut? It suits fair-skinned girls and is healthier than cola. That was against the rules. Especially when the young man was smiling at her, she didn't want to see his eyes dim. One of the girls cupped her face and asked, "How much for one?" Bojo. This question stumped the youth. Indeed, how much should they sell for? My brother is over there. He'll name the price. Bojo pointed towards the figure not far away. Only then did the 2 girls realize that there was someone even more handsome. Moreover, they were of different styles. That person raised his eyes, and the corners of his eyes were stained with indifference. He was simply like a vampire who had walked out of a manga. The only incongruous thing was that there was a cart of coconuts and mangoes beside him. So handsome. The girl couldn't help but say, "You 2 brothers are so handsome." Bojo laughed lightly. I think so too. Ever since they met the young man, the 2 girls' heartbeats had never slowed down. Bojo brought them to the Almighty. She wasn't sure if it was her imagination, but the Almighty's gaze seemed colder than before. The 2 girls also felt that Qin Mo wasn't easy to get along with, but the more he behaved like this, the more attractive he was. How could he be so handsome? Chapter 7:16. Brother Emo, how much are we selling coconuts for? Bojio hasn't forgotten about the important matter. Chin Emo paused, his voice calm. 100. 100. 100? So expensive? Is this a scam? The way the two girls looked at them had obviously changed. Bojio stilled. 100 is too expensive. Expensive? Chin Emo frowned, as though he was asking what was expensive about. That was when Bojio remembered that the Almighty's mineral water cost more than 100 yuan per bottle. If the Almighty was the one setting the price, ordinary people might not be able to afford it. She turned and smiled at the two girls. We're new to this industry and aren't familiar with the market. Just pay us the price you usually pay. It's 15 here, 20 if you go to the scenic area. Some old grandpas on bicycles sell them for 25 each. Those are all relatively remote places. After the two girls breathed a sigh of relief, their faces began to blush again. Bojio smiled faintly, passing 2 coconuts over. I'll take 25, thanks for the information. You're welcome. One of the girls was obviously blushing. Chin Emo watched, the coldness in his eyes deepening. After Bojio took the money, he reached out and grabbed the youngster's collar. Bojio tasted the long-awaited feeling of being dragged like a sack. There were many people at the scenic area, but it wasn't the afternoon. Even though the people at the beach weren't in a frenzy, there were around 30 to 40 people. It was obvious that this car wasn't going to sell. Chin Emo scanned the area, his gaze landing on the restaurant by the beach. He dragged the youngster into the restaurant. Brother Emo, even though I want to eat, I don't have much money on me. Can I use your watch as collateral and redeem it in the future? Bojio was starving. She allowed the Almighty to drag her, her hand caressing her tummy. The storyboard director aside, even the cameraman felt that Spade Z would be more obedient in front of Almighty Chin. The indescribable contrast would make Spade Z's fans happy. But what was Almighty Chin trying to do? Was he really going to use his valuables to exchange for a meal? Sir, I'm sorry, this is a restaurant, may I ask? The receptionist was French and didn't speak Chinese. It was enough to tell that this restaurant was really high-end. Chin Emo chuckled. From the moment he started to pronounce it, there was a hint of romance unique to French. She had a beautiful voice. The key was, what did Almighty Chin say? No one in the production team knew French. Bojio glanced at the storyboard director's confused expression. She smiled faintly as she inched closer to the camera. She adjusted her collar before saying, Brother Emo is planning to sell the coconuts and mangoes to this restaurant to solve the old grandfather's sales problem once and for all. But we are still in discussion and the outcome isn't clear yet. As soon as the young man finished speaking, the receptionist gestured for him to proceed. Bojio continued to translate. He wants to bring Brother Emo to the person in charge. The storyboard director. Their variety show even had the smell of a business meeting. No, wait a minute. Big Spade, you understood everything just now? This was French, not English. It couldn't be that common. Bojio smiled at the camera. Please call me Bookworm. What's Big Spade's best subject? Bojio was about to reply. Chin Emo, who was walking in front, seemed to have heard the question. He turned over, his voice calm. He's best at climbing walls and physics. Chapter 7:17. She could still understand physics. Which subject was climbing walls? The storyboard director glanced at the youngster in confusion. Bojio didn't want to say anything. She was starting to suspect that the Almighty's confession had been a dream. Time trickled by. There wasn't anyone in Jiang City who didn't know about young Master Chin's business skills. In less than 10 minutes, Chin Emo walked out with the French shop manager. The manager was extremely passionate, thanking him repeatedly. He wasn't a local after all, and the French restaurant required the freshest fruits. French cuisine placed great emphasis on the use of ingredients. It was a famous saying that second-rate ingredients couldn't be used to create good dishes. French cuisine used local ingredients, which resulted in different tastes in the north and south. Hence, the most important thing was to eat the right food at the right time of the day. It would be best if someone could deliver the ingredients every day, especially the ones that had just been plucked from the ground. Then they would be able to taste the ingredients. Bojo sat on the sofa lazily, a smile on her face as she watched the scene unfold. What should she do? The sight of the Almighty discussing business made her want to bring him home. It was just a show. In reality, there were many ways to sell the fruits. However, the Almighty had obviously chosen this one out of consideration for the elderly who were still dragging their carts around in such hot weather to sell coconuts. Chinemo watched as the youngster sat there. Without hesitation, he walked over and placed a hand beside her ear. He lowered his body, his magnetic and lingering voice pleasant to the ears. Hungry? A long time ago. Boju lifted her lids, her gaze landing on the thin lips not far from her. She couldn't help but remember the paper separating them just now. She tilted her head to avoid his deep gaze. Chinemo was about to raise his hand, but he retracted it. His gaze dimmed because of the youngster's repulsion. Chinemo never revealed his emotions. Hence, in front of the camera, his handsome face was the main focus. No one noticed that in that moment, Chinmo's pupils had constricted. Both the storyboard director and the cameraman could sense an obvious change in Almighty Chin's aura. It seemed much colder. Lobster or steak, choose one. Chinemo straightened his body and stuffed one hand into his pocket. In that instant, he seemed to have recovered his indifference that kept people at arm's length. This seemed to be the Almighty Chin they knew. It was probably because Almighty Chin had laughed so many times today that they had forgotten his original appearance. But, Almighty, our crew didn't provide any lobsters. The storyboard director spoke softly. Chinemo glanced over. To thank us, the other party wants to treat us. The other party? Who? The restaurant manager smiled at the right time, and the romance of the French was triggered. The people from the production team were already shocked, because they had not expected that the guests on the show would be treated by someone else. Are all top students able to do this? It remained to be seen whether Brainiac could do that. French cuisine was all about appetizers. Just by watching Almighty Chin raise his glass and chat with the chef, they felt that they had brought a variety show to new heights. Chapter 7:18. The storyboard director glanced over at Almighty Chin. Since he had been watching them, she didn't dare to be too loud. It's with the main director. The production team won't be broadcasting it, it's just for you. I understand, but how did your main director get a photo of Brother Mo when he was young? Bojo arched a brow. Based on her understanding of the Almighty, such a photo should have been hidden and not shown to anyone. The storyboard director lowered her voice. The main director said that a good friend from the industry had shown it to him, but he didn't want to reveal his friend's name. But based on his description, she should be a beauty. Beauty? Another good friend of the main director? Movie Queen popped into her mind. She reached out to pat the storyboard director's shoulder. Your production team isn't bad. They have a bright future ahead of them. The storyboard director. What was with the strange feeling of being complimented? Just because they had gotten a photo of Almighty Chin. They had a bright future ahead of them? Big Spade. How dare you say you aren't interested in Almighty Chin? Hurry and get the photo. I'll help you keep an eye on Brother Mo. Don't let him come over. The youngster stuffed a hand into her pocket, looking as handsome as ever, smart and sly. The storyboard director went to look for the main director. The main director was still immersed in the ice cream kiss. He turned to the storyboard director with a serious expression. This scene isn't bad. It has the effect of a variety show. We can let them kiss a few more times. The storyboard director. Boss, have you ever seen a variety show with kissing? Where's your integrity? Half a minute later, after explaining the situation, the storyboard director finally retrieved her boss's phone. She walked towards Bojo anxiously. You have to keep this a secret from Almighty Chin. Don't worry. Bojo winked. So handsome. The storyboard director coughed heavily before handing the phone to the youngster. A photo that was obviously taken in secret appeared on the screen. The photo was obviously taken at the Chin family's old mansion. The main character was dressed in a pure white British suit, and had delicate features like a doll. He was sitting in the garden in the summer, with a cup of hot tea on the table covered with plants. He was holding a book in his hand. He probably noticed that someone was taking a picture of him in front of him, so he moved the book to the side and looked at the camera as if he was looking at some bacteria. His arrogant dog-like appearance was simply unique in the world. In an instant, it struck her nerves. The rumbling of thunder in the sky was no different from what he was feeling now. This is Almighty? Bojo didn't know how she managed to ask that question. Probably because she had never seen the youngster speak like that. The storyboard director nudged her shoulder. Were you touched by the Almighty's cuteness? It wasn't just cuteness. Bojo took another glance at the photo before turning to look at the Almighty. It was an indescribable feeling. The storyboard director continued. The Almighty's cuteness when he was young would make anyone want to rub his head and kiss his cheeks. Bojo took a moment to recall the incident. That day, her father had suddenly wanted to introduce her to a friend of the same age. That in itself was strange enough. Since she had only been around the keyboard since young, she wasn't good at making friends. Chapter 719. But the moment Bojo saw her little friend, she forgot about the little rocket. Her father was lying to her. How was he her age? He was a puppy doll. Especially when he spoke, he was very polite. Compared to the doll in front of her, a pet like the little rocket was really boring. Hence, she couldn't control herself and pounced on him the first time they met. But it was obvious that her little friend didn't understand her passion. Instead, he rubbed his forehead, using a cold and noble voice to warn her, "Get up." At that time, she was really possessed. She felt that her little friend was too cute and couldn't control herself. She kissed his face. At that time, her little friend's expression changed, his angry little face turning red. He looked at her as though she was 1,000 germs, wanting to destroy her on the spot. At that time, Bojo felt that her little friend didn't understand her passion, which was why he despised her. She stood there aggrievedly, rubbing the bump on her head. She took out her best things to please the doll, asking him, "How much do you cost per kilo? What do you want?" The doll seemed to be very interested in her keyboard, and gave her 3 words in a very light tone. Since she was a doll, she had a temper. Bojo understood. "I want to buy you. You can be my pet." Bojo bent over and took out her little treasure. Listening to her words, the doll couldn't stand it anymore and knocked her head. "Are you an idiot? You don't buy people by weight." "Oh." Bojo was disappointed for a moment. "Then I won't give you money. I'll take care of you in the future." The doll's veins popped. "I don't need you to take care of me. Don't be shy." She understood the doll's feelings. The doll glared at her for a while. "You'd better shut up right now." "Fine, you won't let me talk because you're shy." I know, you just ate a lot of chocolate. You like it, right? I'll go steal some more." At that time, Bojo felt that the doll was hard to coax. She couldn't understand his thoughts at all. But since she was prepared to take care of him as a pet, what else could she do? She couldn't control herself, she had to pamper him. Since then, every time she saw a pet, she would press him down, rub him, and kiss him. Her pet was good at everything. It was beautiful, looked good when it ate, and read books that gave her headaches. The number of times it called her an idiot was increasing, but it was still very handsome. It was just that it had a bad temper and was easily shy. It was always embarrassed in front of outsiders. In the past, Bojo had been puzzled. What a good relationship they had. Why was her canine pet always embarrassed? Bojo understood now. If the Almighty knew that he was the one who always pushed him down, the Almighty would probably close his eyes and throw her into the sea to feed the sharks. Seeing that the youngster hadn't spoken for so long, the storyboard director stirred. "What are you thinking about?" "I thought about how I had pushed the Almighty down when he was young. It was best if no one knew about this. She would be happy on her own. An unexpected reunion with his childhood pet. Moreover, this person was an Almighty. The feeling was rather subtle. Honestly, Bojo had never expected the adorable puppy doll to grow into the Almighty. Chapter 720. It was probably because the youngster had turned back too many times with a seductive expression. Chinemo glanced up, the corners of his eyes arching as he walked over. Bojio had never felt guilty in the past, but this time, it was probably because she had pounced on the Almighty often when she was young and had even gone overboard. She couldn't relate her puppy to the Almighty in front of her, hence, her reaction was a little too much. She tossed the phone back to the storyboard director as though it was a hot potato. Seeing the youngster's actions, Chinemo narrowed his deep eyes. What's that? The main director's phone. Bojio chuckled lightly, trying her best to divert the Almighty's attention. Do you want an ice cream cone? Chinemo retracted his gaze, focusing on the youngster's smiling face. The thoughts he had suppressed started rising again. A certain someone's behavior of getting close to him really made him want to do something that he shouldn't have done. For some reason, Bojio reached out to touch the bridge of her nose when she saw the Almighty's expression. It was dangerous. F*CK, little spade, hurry and take a look, Fatty is starting to take off his clothes. From afar, Lin Chintao's laughter could not be more obvious. Even though she didn't understand what was so good about Fatty's naked body, it was better than dealing with the Almighty. Hence she ran. Before she ran, she didn't forget to turn to allow the storyboard director to leave. The storyboard director couldn't tell what was strange about Big Spade after seeing the photos of the Almighty when he was young. But she couldn't pinpoint the exact reason. The news of her meeting her childhood pet seemed to be possessed, popping up every now and then, harassing Bojio. Chinemo reached out, tugging the youngster's collar. How can Zhao Samping look? You have to be so proactive. Fatty was speechless. Hey Chinemo, I'm right here, how can I not look? I'm so handsome. Ha ha ha, that stomach of yours is indeed interesting. Lin Chintao added mercilessly. Fatty blushed. What do you know, it's called abs. Bojio caressed her tummy before caressing the Almighty's. She glanced up with a mischievous smile. Almighty Fatty, look, this is what I call abs. Chinemo glanced at the hand that suddenly appeared in front of his abdomen. Even though the hand was slender and beautiful, it was much smaller than his own. It was as fair as jade, causing his eyes to sink. This guy must be doing it on purpose. Touch him? Or should he choose this position to touch? Chinemo didn't smile easily. Lin Chintao watched from the side, an inexplicable chill running down his spine. Speaking of which, if you pluck fur from the tiger's belly, you'll either be killed or eaten by the tiger. How could little Spade not know such a simple logic? Zhao Samping watched her actions as well. He felt as though his body was being humiliated, but he couldn't say anything. That scene was also very funny. Of course, the cameraman would not miss it. This kind of scene was also good for the ending. The main thing was that the young man's expression when he raised his chin was very arrogant and cocky. He gave off the vibe of a young master from the capital. Chapter 721. Yet, Chinemo asked the youngster in a low voice. Is it nice to touch? Bojio was still in a daze as she nodded seriously. It's really nice to touch. Ever since she found out the Almighty was her pet, she didn't have to worry anymore, right? She had pounced on him so many times when she was young. It was only right to touch him. The youngster's eyes narrowed into slits as she smiled. Chinemo inched closer to her ear. Huh. Lin Chintao shook his head. Even though he wasn't sure why, he felt as though little Spade was doomed. But a certain someone was behaving like the young master of a rich family, smiling at Chinemo, smiling at the tiger? How could the tiger tolerate you? Little Spade, did you lose your intelligence? Next is the last mission. The filming crew watched as the sky darkened. Let's have a swimming competition. Lin Chintao had already accepted it. As long as it wasn't gay content, he could accept it. Besides, he had already tried the terrifying death chamber. What else was there to be afraid of? He wasn't the one swimming, his captain was around. The storyboard director hesitated. Should Big Spade or Almighty Chin be the one to reveal herself? The latter was hopeless. After all, Almighty Chin was a formidable existence. She couldn't afford to offend him. She could only turn her head and look at the youth. Bojio replied, I'm afraid of water and can't swim, not even with a lifebuoy, I'll faint. With that, Chinemo glanced at the youngster. Even though he hadn't gotten all the information, But Qin Emo still knew the basics. Young Master Fu was indeed a good-for-nothing. But he had his own strengths, such as swimming. Qin Mo's gaze deepened, his gaze sweeping past the youngster's face. Bojiu allowed the Almighty to scrutinize her without a change in expression. In the end, she sighed. Besides, I'm injured. What kind of injury? Qin Emo arched a brow. Bojiu lifted her black t-shirt, biting down on her lips. Red mark. Do you see it? Qin Mo's gaze landed on the inch of fair skin. From his angle, the youngster's flat and fair abdomen was obvious. Even his belly button seemed to be different from others. It was small and white. Not to mention the curve on both sides, which was enough to make people go crazy. He did not see any red marks. All he could see was that the guy in front of him was really asking for a beating. Qin Emo reached out and pressed the youngster's shirt back to its original position. Right now he only had two thoughts. First, he would never let the youngster undress in front of so many people, especially in front of the camera. Second, at night, he would let a certain someone touch him all over. Bojiu couldn't understand why her puppy was glaring at her so fiercely. To think that she had predicted that there would be a swimming segment, so she had done something to her body just to avoid such a situation. Ah, right, she forgot that the current dog-type pet still had the aloofness of the Almighty. Bojiu smiled mischievously. He turned towards the storyboard director. I'll swim for our team. Chapter 722. Rao Rong chuckled. It seems like I'm the only one in this team. The captains of the three teams stood on the same level. The girls in the filming crew were overwhelmed by his handsomeness. Before they could react, Qin Emo had already bent over, tugging off his clothes suavely. His black hair was messy and sexy due to the movement of his clothes. The lines on his body were perfect, especially the lines on his abdomen, which were clear and defined. Bojiu watched the Almighty, reminded of the puppy she had had in her childhood. Back then, his hair had been just like that, soft to the touch. The moment Qin Emo moved, a sharp intake of breath could be heard from the surroundings. Both the storyboard director and the main director were overwhelmed with excitement. How many fangirls would go crazy if this scene was broadcasted? According to Feng Yi, every time Qin Emo showed his face, he had to pay by the minute. Every time he showed his upper body. Seriously, the filming crew could already see the skyrocketing viewership ratings. What was wrong with Almighty Qin this time? He was so cooperative. Was it because the filming crew was too handsome? Bojiu didn't move. She was still searching for a time to caress her puppy's hair. Pouncing wasn't possible since her puppy had grown up to become the Almighty. What kind of person was the Almighty? Bojiu couldn't be clearer. That explained why she had always wanted to bring the Almighty home. From the looks of it, there wasn't anything wrong with her thoughts. Little Spade, you better control your gaze. Do you know how you're looking at Qin Emo now? It's like a puppy looking at a bone, ready to pounce on it. I didn't believe the rumors I heard about you in the past, but now I realize how naive I was. You even brought your homosexuality into the production team. No, that's not right. There's something wrong with the production team. Are they helping you to seduce Qin Emo? Since we're both assassins, even though you're still a little behind me, let me be honest with you. Qin Emo is too straightforward. Don't waste your energy, it's useless. Once she heard his words, she stopped all thoughts of a puppy, because she finally remembered the most important thing. Confession, the Almighty confessed to her. The premise is she is not a boy. But the Almighty was gay. Lin Chintao observed the youngster's silent expression, thinking that he had been too harsh with his words. He coughed heavily. Actually, I'm just saying. There's no such thing as a straight man that can't be bent, right? It's all about looks. You're so handsome, you'll definitely have a chance. Bojiu glanced at him gloomily. She didn't say a word as she watched him leap out of the sea. Lin Chintao was watching as well. As a man, even he couldn't take his eyes off Qin Emo when he stood up from the sea. Especially when the seawater slid past his lower abdomen and his black hair that was dripping with water droplets. It was enough to blow up a group of people. Chapter 723. What a joke. So what if he was crushed? When they had been young, he had pounced on them. But a true man shouldn't boast about his past. Besides, the Almighty wasn't easily crushed. The youngster stuffed her hands into her pockets, replying, "I'm not gay." Lin Chuntao replied seriously, "I used to believe that. It was *T to say that he wasn't gay. Have you forgotten how you took the initiative to kiss Qin Mo with an ice cream cone in your hand? Little Spade, there's a recording, stop trying to deny it." Bo Jiu ignored him since the Almighty resembled her puppy now. Especially when her hair was wet, it was even more so. She remembered. There was a time when she had been busy making a small keyboard, and had forgotten that her pet had invited her to play. Her puppy hadn't spoken to her for 3 days. Even her parents hadn't been able to persuade him. His face was cold, as if someone owed him $1 million. Bojo had no choice but to sneak in. Speaking of which, that was when she had learned her wall climbing skills. She entered the bedroom with much difficulty, but didn't see anyone. At this time, as a smart kid who wanted to be a hacker in the future, once he heard the sound of water in the bathroom, he would definitely go to the bathroom to take a look. Who knew that as soon as she pushed open the door with the leaves on her head, she would be greeted by the sight of a dog pet with wet hair and snow-white clothes, squinting at her. He wasn't wearing any clothes. Bojo swore that she had only wanted to apologize and hadn't had any intention of peeking. In the end, her puppy hadn't intended to speak to her for 3 days. In an instant, it had become 10 days. Moreover, he had been looking at her as though she was a wolf. Bojo didn't know how many good things she had used to coax her puppy. In the end, her puppy had finally forgiven her, not forgetting to tug at her collar. As a lady, where's your restraint? Bojo hadn't been good at Chinese back then. Restraint? What was that? Her puppy had laughed coldly for a long time. If it hadn't been for his illness, Bojo felt as though her puppy would never have discovered her good side. Ever since then, she had kept her puppy. At that time, the two of them always leaned against each other to play games, and they cleared Super Mario. Of course, what he remembered the most was being forced to learn Mandarin by his pet. However, at that time the Almighty didn't seem to hate girls that much. Why was he different now that he had grown up? Was it because he was cuter when he was younger? Very liked by the Almighty? Classmate Jiu always had an obsessive self-confidence. Obviously, he had overlooked this point. No matter who it was, he would always be pounced on by a girl when he was young. They wouldn't think that the other party was cute. He felt that the other party was a bandit. When Qin Mo came up from the pool, he saw the youngster's confused expression. She was very close to him, and the light of the setting sun shone on the youngster's clean hair. Such a person should have been taught a lesson a long time ago. However, they weren't in a hotel, so it wasn't convenient for them to do anything. Qin Mo turned sideways, picked up the white towel on his head, and covered the youngster's face with it. I won't watch it anymore. The more he watched, the more he couldn't control himself. Chapter 724. Bojo removed the towel from her face, arching a brow. You're filming even when you're resting in the hotel? Little Spade, don't you watch variety shows? Lin Chuntao was shocked by her question. What era was she living in to ask such a question? Bojo lowered her lids, tugging her collar. I don't. Then what do you usually watch? As a variety lover, Lin Chuntao couldn't understand someone who didn't watch variety shows. Before Bojo could reply, Qin Mo walked over, his voice faint. Qin Mo walked over, his voice faint. Overbearing CEO fall in love with me. Immersing. Lin Chuntao's face was filled with question marks. Qin Mo's smooth chin was still wet, his black hair still wet. He usually watches these types such as Sweet Little Wife, or Keeping in Eastport's Prince Charming. Bojo. Why did the Almighty have to remember her dark history so clearly? Lin Chuntao glanced at the youngster's expression, patting her shoulder in a brotherly manner. It's true, the books you read reveal your true nature. The novels had been found from the bookshelf in Fujio's room. It wasn't convenient for Bojo to say they weren't hers, hence she smiled suavely. I bought them for girls when I was chasing them. Chasing girls? Qin Mo paused in the act of putting on his clothes. His fingers paused for a moment before he started buttoning his white shirt slowly. His eyes were heavy and cold. Lin Chuntao was still conversing with the youngster. Don't insult my intelligence. Who would give such books to a girl? Bojiu replied lazily, me. Before boarding the bus. She didn't seem to care if Lin Chuntao believed her or not. Lin Chuntao continued to educate the youngster. For variety shows, the best part is before and after bedtime. Don't think that you're really resting, there will still be cameras. As a hacker, she had to change her bad habit of hacking the cameras. Bojiu listened to Lin Chuntao, reminding herself to control her instincts. Fortunately, there was some good news. She was finally able to give her phone to everyone. The days without the internet were tough for esports players. The moment Zhao Sampeng received his phone, he kissed the white phone. It must have been hard on you without daddy to take care of you. The production crew. Fatai, come and take a look. We posted on Weibo and some fans guessed that we're recording a show. Lin Chuntao looked at the number of reposts on his official Weibo and stroked his chin. I feel like I'm going to be famous. Zhao Sampeng pointed at one of them and said, Look, someone is praising me for being handsome. The eyes of the masses were indeed sharp. None of you can. Almighty Fatty, you should see his nickname first. The youngster swept a glance at the screen and reminded Zhao Sampeng, who was already a little dizzy, with a lazy voice. Zhao Sampeng chuckled. Nickname. What's so good about nicknames? The point is, holy shit, what's the meaning of this? Who named them? His eyes were blind. Do you have any culture? I think he's quite cultured, ha ha ha. Lin Chuntao laughed so hard he almost died in a car accident. Little did he know that at this moment, Almighty Xiao, who had never spoken, suddenly said, Who are you sleeping with tonight? The person she was asking was Qin Mo. Chapter 725. All of a sudden, the voices on the commercial bus quieted down. Everyone turned towards Almighty Xiao. The production crew suddenly remembered that a long time ago, everyone had been hyping up Xiao Mo's relationship with Xiao Mo. After all, Qin Mo was the only one who could catch Almighty Xiao's attention. Zhao Sampeng coughed heavily. Captain, you mean? The question on Weibo. Almighty Xiao had said a few more words. Zhao Sampeng heaved a sigh of relief. He had been afraid his captain would snatch Qin Mo from Little Spade. He seems to be asking for you to sleep with me. I'm fine with it, but what do you think? Everyone was shocked to hear Almighty Xiao say so many words at once. From his tone, the two of them couldn't have been together in the past. Qin Mo remained silent, reaching out to tug the youngster's collar. It was obvious he wanted to sleep with her. Zhao Sampeng was worried his captain would be upset, hence he consoled. It's fine, Captain, I can accompany you tonight. It's fine. 2 words, a completely different attitude. Let's drink tonight. Almighty Xiao glanced over, his words clearly directed at Qin Mo. All right. The two of them went back and forth. They acted as though there was no one else around. Lin Chuntao turned decisively, lowering his voice. Little Spade, your love rival has appeared. Almighty Xiao isn't easy to deal with. Do you have any countermeasures? Does throwing you out count? Bojiu arched a brow. Ever since the Almighty had asked them to sleep together, Bojiu had felt the need to communicate with the filming crew. Sleep separately? The storyboard director's voice was a little loud. Even Qin Mo, who had his eyes shut, glanced over. Bojiu shot the storyboard director a look. Cough. The storyboard director lowered her voice further. No, it will be more interesting with 2 people in a room. Don't worry, we are professionals, it won't be a problem. Bojiu wanted to say that wasn't what she was worried about, but before she could continue, they had reached the hotel. It was probably because of the Weibo post. The fans living in Lin City had now gathered together and appeared at the entrance of the hotel. Everyone looked very excited. Zhao Sampeng took out a small mirror and a large black mirror from his pocket. He looked at himself and turned to ask Bojiu, Am I super handsome now? Special. But you're a big man. Why the hell would you carry a small mirror with you? In fact, he was really handsome. Especially after completing the mission. Everyone put on the team's uniform with a white shirt inside and a black bag on one shoulder. When they got off the bus, they immediately became a sight to behold. Moreover, This kind of scenery was not something that could be seen all the time. When the three teams stood together, it was more than just eye-catching. The screams of the fans could be heard from afar. I really can't help it. It's all because I'm too handsome, Zhao Samping said as he walked. Lin Chentao unceremoniously kicked him. As fans, they loved watching their idols interact like this. It always felt very loving. Moreover, only after meeting the real person did he realize something. Spade Z and Almighty Qin were really handsome. Moreover, the actions of those two people could really stir up people's hearts. Let's take the simplest example. The youngster was originally walking in front with one hand in his pocket. Almighty Qin reached out to pull the strap of the youngster's bag. The youngster stopped, glancing over to hear what Almighty Qin was saying. Almighty Qin looked at the youngster, his lips curving into a smile. His smile was so warm that the fans couldn't help but want to take pictures. The production crew hadn't expected so many fans to camp at the hotel. Fortunately, they were quick to react and immediately called the hotel's security, asking them to help control the scene. There were indeed many things to take note of when dealing with fans. Otherwise, it would be hard to explain once it made the headlines. Hence, even the security guards didn't dare to push them, using their bodies to block. The main director shouted until his voice was hoarse. With much difficulty, he managed to send the guests into the hotel. Fortunately, nothing untoward happened. But there was one thing. If the situation continued, tomorrow's filming would probably be shortened. There were benefits to being popular, but at the same time, there were unavoidable obstacles. F***CK, the shape of my hair. Zhao Samping pointed at his head. It had indeed been squeezed a moment ago and now, it was standing straight, looking rather amusing. Lin Chentao couldn't bring himself to laugh. This is my last outdoor variety show. Bojiu arched a brow. Lin Chentao gritted his teeth. Why aren't you asking me the reason? Bojiu remained silent, unwrapping a lollipop. Lin Chentao couldn't help himself. In the past, I didn't think fans should be like this. What do you think? Zhao Samping was the one who asked that. Lin Chentao couldn't describe the feeling he had. It was just that some people had told them to stop, but they still chased after them. When they moved, they would even bump into the production crew's assistant. It was a painful feeling. Zhao Samping felt the need to console the youngster in the alliance group. Little Lin, pitiful, let me tell you, this isn't much. Look at how little Spade was splashed with cola by the fans. Didn't he say anything? The moment he finished his sentence, in an instant, the surrounding temperature dropped by a few degrees. Bojiu hadn't expected her almighty fatty to bring this up. She froze in the middle of her lollipop, turning towards Qin Mo, who was standing beside her. When? His cold and deep voice seemed to be able to send chills down one's spine. When Qin Mo's eyes weren't smiling, he gave off a devilish coldness. Zhao Samping swallowed hard. What when? The fans splashed cola on me. Qin Mo's aura changed visibly. Zhao Samping understood what he meant. Don't you know? It was at the start of the competition. Since Little Spade became the vice-captain of Supreme Alliance, so, that wasn't a fan. Bojiu interrupted Zhao Samping, her eyes fixed on Qin Mo. She knew the bottom line of a puppy. Qin Mo watched the youngster with a deep gaze. It was an oppressive aura. Zhao Samping and Lin Chentao wanted to hug each other to resist the coldness. Who's the mastermind? Qin Mo's voice rang out again. There was no warmth in his voice. Bojiu didn't reply since she had already dealt with him. If she said anything, her relationship with Old Bai would be exposed. It wouldn't be good if the Almighty found out she had hired someone to keep an eye on things, and guess what was going on? Qin Mo glanced at the youngster before tugging her collar, speaking slowly. You don't want to say? Then let me ask you. Was there an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth? Of course. Bojiu smiled. Then, everyone heard Qin Mo say, okay. His fingers released the youngster's collar. Lin Chentao tilted his head. Is the main point of this matter about revenge? Yes, Qin Mo. You don't know how vengeful he is. Those who like him are completely bewitched by his face. Think about it. When he was playing with us, didn't he always dig holes for us? Zhao Samping wouldn't let go of any chance to defame Qin Mo. It was important to maintain the image of a nemesis. Lin Chuntao held his hand. I think you're right. You have good taste. How are you feeling now? A second ago, they had been kicking each other, but now, they seemed to have found each other's soulmates. They were extremely concerned for each other. Lin Chuntao replied honestly, compared to Little Spade, my fans seem especially adorable. Bojiu glanced at them before glancing at Brother Mo's erect back. She gave each of them a kick, preparing to start the fight. Zhao Sampeng hadn't expected himself to lose to Qin Mo, but to lose to Little Spade as well? This was an insult to his handsomeness. Don't come over. If you come any closer, I'll tell others that you molested me. Zhao Sampeng hid behind the sofa, pointing at her. Lin Chuntao was hiding as well. When he heard her words, he exploded. Fatty, can you be more shameless? No one will believe such an excuse. No, Captain, don't go, save me. It's too disadvantageous for the two of us to fight. With your help, Little Spade will definitely lose. Rao Rong chuckled, lifting his legs to leave. His words were even more shameless to him. But when he turned the corner, he turned back to glance at the silver-haired youngster. It seemed like Qin Mo really cared about Spadesy. It wasn't his style to care for someone so much. After all, that man. He had never had any feelings. Time trickled by. After Bojiu was done with the two of them, she pondered for a moment before heading to the room to look for the Almighty. That was how humans were. They didn't want to destroy the beautiful memories of their childhood. Bojiu wasn't an exception. Ever since she found out that the Almighty was her pet, she had to coax him. Bojiu felt the need to coax him. Even though the Almighty had changed so much, there was definitely an awkward little button in his heart. Bojiu understood. When she pushed the door open, she heard Qin Mo on the phone. His tone was calm as he said, "Go and investigate." Bojiu paused for a moment before allowing the cameraman to follow her in. Qin Mo had just hung up and glanced up at her. "Come over." Bojiu felt as though her pet was giving her a way out. She broke into a devilish smile. Unbeknownst to her, she had become more obedient in front of the camera. "I'm going down for a drink. You can reflect on yourself in the room." Qin Mo pinched the youngster's face, his gaze softening. "Once you've thought it through, send me a WeChat message, understand?" Bojiu regretted that she couldn't be like when she had been younger, pouncing on him and coaxing him. She still had to reflect on herself. She would send the Almighty a message after playing a few games. Xiaoda, that person, obviously harbored ill intentions towards her pet dog. The Almighty was really slow in this aspect. Wasn't he gay? Chapter 726. On the other hand, the storyboard director was troubled by the content. Should they shoot it or not? If they did, they would have to include the previous scenes as well. But the previous topics were too sensitive and weren't suitable to be broadcasted. But through this incident, the filming crew understood. Some people in the production team also understood that there was a reason behind the Coke splashing incident. In the past, they had always felt that the entertainment industry was full of twists and turns. But now, they realized that as long as you were the center of attention, you would be pitted against. Almighty Qin's attitude was obvious as well. He was protective. The storyboard director took a moment before deciding to keep the part where Almighty Qin pinched Little Spade's face since it was too loving. The rest could be edited out. The youngster noticed them, arching a brow. "Why aren't you following Brother Mo? I'll stay and film you." The storyboard director felt as though she was turning into a Spade fan, wanting to give the youngster more screen time. Bojiu rejected them decisively. "Hurry and film Brother Mo. With you guys around, Almighty Xiao won't dare to do anything to him." The storyboard director. "There will be someone filming," the cameraman interrupted. Bojiu smiled. "That's good." The storyboard director couldn't help asking, "What do you think Almighty Xiao will do to Almighty Qin?" "His gaze is so obvious, what do you think?" Bojiu asked. The storyboard director coughed. Bojiu took a moment before breaking into a smile. "But he won't have a chance." "Why?" Bojiu arched a brow. "He isn't Brother Mo's type." Was she going to expose Almighty Qin's ideal girlfriend? The storyboard director's eyes lit up. "What type does Almighty Qin like?" Someone as handsome and aggressive as me. Boju leaned back, her long legs crossed as she opened the Hero app on her phone. A mischievous smile on her face. The storyboard director. Should we broadcast this part? The cameraman asked his colleague. The storyboard director held her forehead. We can't broadcast it, it'll attract haters. It's fine, I have a lot of haters. Bojo arched a brow at the two of them. Do you want to play hero? I'll carry you guys. The reason why the production team was so excited when they heard that they were going to invite an esports god was because the entire production team had been addicted to playing games recently. The youngsters' question. The cameraman was obviously shaken. The storyboard director replied solemnly, I'm still working. It's mainly because you're so dark-skinned. What's there to be proud of? Playing games with the guests is also considered work. The cameraman sat down and asked, which area are you from? Hey. The storyboard director insisted. The cameraman said, did you forget what Tima said about us? 10,000-year pit. The storyboard director's attitude changed instantly. This episode is mainly about esports. How can there be no gaming scenes? Let's film Spade's hand speed, come on let's go. The little assistant didn't expect that the important task of filming would fall on her. However, looking at the people who kept their heads down and swiping their phones, she always felt that some people could only be truly understood after interacting with them. For example, the young man didn't talk much, but he could make people feel comfortable around him. It was completely unexpected. Even Almighty Chin was the same. He had thought that such a great god would not be easy to approach. So much so that they were a little afraid. But now, it seemed that although Almighty Chin was cold, he would never make things difficult for the production team. For the first time, they had the desire to do something well. While bringing happiness to everyone, they also wanted to tell the fans what these almighties were like. The people they liked were truly wonderful. In contrast to the addicted gaming in the room, in the hotel restaurant, the decor was elegant, and there was someone playing the piano. Ever since Almighty Xiao had said that on the commercial bus, the production team really wanted to dig deeper. National champion Almighty Xiao and MVP Almighty Chin. What exactly was the relationship between the two of them? But that was just a thought. The main director called, asking them to film something else and not disturb their conversation. At this moment, the production team finally realized the two people sitting inside. One was young Master Chin from Jiang City, the other was young Master Xiao from Lin City. They weren't just rich, they were also powerful. Simply put, if you looked at esports, both of them had a red background. I have an answer to the question you asked me previously. Some people who often live under pressure might have a second personality buried deep in their body after experiencing certain things. The things they like would change. This is the information, you can take a look. Chin Mo's gaze fell on the folder that the other party handed over, but he didn't say anything. Almighty Xiao took a sip of wine. This time, who are you investigating? Nobody. Chin Mo tilted his head and lit a cigarette. His slender fingers held it, and a few images of the youngster flashed through his mind. No, that didn't seem like the reaction of the second personality being stimulated. But if it wasn't the second personality, how could he explain the information that Fatty had given him when he was in America? A person who had never touched a computer. Suddenly he knew hacking skills. A person who used to frown when he saw a game. He just stayed in the hospital, and when he came out he became the rookie king of Zone C. Other than the stimulation of the second personality, there was no logical way to explain it. Chin Mo's eyes deepened. His face couldn't be seen clearly in the smoke. There is another situation that I am still researching. When I think it is possible, I will call you. But I also have something to ask you. Chin Mo raised his eyebrows. What? Is your hand really fine, or did you come back early for some reason? When Big Brother Xiao asked this question, Lin Fan's expression changed. The smoke became much thinner. Chin Mo flicked his cigarette. Find out more about the enemy? No need. Xiao placed his glass down and stood up. But we both know that if your hand isn't healed, Supreme Alliance will never be able to defeat Xiangnan. Chin Mo took a puff of his cigarette but didn't say anything. The conversation between the two of them ended there. In the room, Bojo felt that she had killed enough, and it was time to remind the Almighty. She opened WeChat. Brother Emo, you can't drink until you're full. Do you want to barbecue? After listening to the voice message, Chin Emo reached out to extinguish his cigarette. Hungry? Being hungry wasn't a big deal. She was more worried about what someone would do to him. There was something in Chin Mo's voice. Come down. All right. Bojo paused. Where's Almighty Xiao? Chin Emo arched a brow. Why are you concerned about him? Aren't you drinking together? Chin Emo replied. I finished. Bojo was satisfied with his answer. She knew her puppy wouldn't be Almighty Xiao's type. She kept her phone and stuffed her hands into her pockets as she headed downstairs. Chin Mo's gaze didn't leave the screen. If it really was a second personality, what if it suddenly disappeared? What would happen? Chin Emo thought about the possibility. Chin Emo tightened his grip on his glass. Even his breathing seemed to stop for half a beat. He wouldn't allow that to happen. The lights dimmed, and the piano music in the dining room changed. The moment Bojo came down, she saw that the cameraman hadn't followed them in. He was standing there. Did that mean that the Almighty and Almighty Xiao had been alone? She arched a brow and walked forward. There was a knife and fork on the table, along with a bottle of red wine that had been soaked. Bojo walked over and picked up the bottle, preparing to pour herself a glass. Chin Emo held onto the youngster's wrist. It seems like someone hasn't reflected deeply enough. I was wrong. The 3 words were insincere. That attitude. Chin Emo glanced at her and pushed the steak over. Finish this and head upstairs to sleep. Bojo was really hungry. She ate the meat and didn't forget to ask about the enemy. What did you and Almighty Xiao talk about? Chin Emo glanced at the youngster's side profile, his voice slow. It's about a second personality. After some people suffer psychological trauma, they would become completely different from before. Even some of their preferences would change. The intelligent Bojo wouldn't assume that the Almighty was telling her a story, but she wouldn't fall into his trap. If she did, it would be equivalent to admitting that there was something wrong with her. She continued to eat the beef, her lips lifting. It sounds interesting. I thought you would talk about gaming, but it's about psychology. The world of a bookworm is always so profound. The formation of a second personality will affect a person to a certain extent. Chin Emo removed the wine glass but didn't end the topic. Instead, he glanced at Bojo with a deep gaze. For example, what you were good at in the past would become good at in the future. What you weren't good at in the past would be stimulated by certain things. It wouldn't be interesting because the second personality isn't the main personality. Is it interesting to have information? Bojo couldn't understand why the Almighty's aura had turned cold. But her instincts told her. The so-called second personality was definitely related to her. The Almighty had already started investigating her. Perhaps it was because she had been caught red-handed in the convenience store. Regardless of the situation, it was only a matter of time before the Almighty discovered her secret. Bojo took another bite of the steak. It's interesting to exist. Is that so? Chin Mo's voice turned colder. Bojo chuckled. Yes. The meal wasn't much. Mainly, Bojo wasn't sure how much the Almighty had found about her. He probably already knew that there was a huge difference between the current her and the past her. Hence, the next step was to investigate. Bojo narrowed her eyes. Fortunately, the cameraman didn't enter. Just as Bojo was about to ask the storyboard director to arrange another room for her, Chin Emo pulled her into the bedroom. Just as Bojo was about to ask the storyboard director to arrange another room for her, Chin Emo pulled her forcefully into the bedroom. A door separated the filming crew. There was a camera in the room. At this moment, the guests were free to do whatever they wanted. Bojo hadn't expected that the Almighty wouldn't even do anything. He only said 2 words to the camera, sleep. He immediately pulled a towel over and covered the camera. Chapter 727. In front of the screen, the main director almost choked on the tea in his mouth when he saw this scene. He picked up the walkie-talkie and said, "What time is it? He's already asleep? Get him to take the towel away and take more bedtime shots." Why don't you tell Almighty Chin yourself? They didn't dare to order him around. The director coughed heavily, shifting the topic. You guys must be tired after a day of filming, go to bed early. The assistant and cameraman glanced up silently, understanding. As expected, they weren't the only ones afraid of Almighty Chin. The director was the same. The only one who wasn't afraid of Almighty Chin was Big Spade, who slept with him. Actually, when Bojo saw his actions, she was momentarily at a loss. But she quickly whistled. Then he turned around and unplugged the voice cable. It was a piece of cake for a hacker. Bojo had been smiling leisurely. But when she saw Chin Emo walking towards her, she raised her eyebrows. The Almighty's aura was too obvious. Bojo wanted to turn to the side. But this time, Chin Emo didn't want to exchange blows with a certain someone. He pressed his entire body against the wall and pressed the youngster against it. The coldness in his eyes couldn't be more obvious. That gaze, Bojo had only seen it when she had fought against Chin Emo in her previous life. There wasn't any warmth. It was as though he was catching a criminal. It seemed that he had really been angered by her this time. Or perhaps he knew something. Bojo arched a brow. After finding out that the Almighty was her pet, she couldn't imagine how she could become his enemy. But Bojo understood. The two of them were bound to become rivals. The Key Case Investigation Unit had never stopped investigating her. Because she was reborn, she had a lot of natural advantages. Even the environment around her was helping her to cover up. Even if it was the Almighty, he wouldn't look at her with suspicion. But this was just temporary. One day, the Almighty would find out who she was. Let's not talk about the girl first. She couldn't stop touching the computer. She had something she had to do. The two of them were on opposite sides from the very beginning. You don't think it's important for a person to disappear? Bojo felt the pressure on her wrist increase. He knew that the other party's emotions weren't right. Bojo heaved a long sigh. Brother Emo, that's not what I meant. I just feel that if the second personality is formed, it wouldn't disappear for no reason. If the second personality is stronger than the first, it would be able to take over the peak. But regardless of which personality it is, once it appears, it would be remembered. Besides, since the second personality has appeared, it wouldn't be willing to disappear. Chin Mo's deep gaze seemed to be scrutinizing her. In that case, if it were you, you wouldn't bear to disappear either? Of course. Bojo knew it was an abstract question, but to be fair, she didn't want to disappear. At the very least, she wanted to win the National League. She enjoyed her current state. Chin Emo lowered his lids and looked at the youngster in front of him. His aura seemed to be returning to normal. When Bojo saw the coldness in his eyes disappear, she heaved a sigh of relief. However, he threw her onto the large bed at the side. While the teenager's eyes were wide open, Chin Emo had already returned to his cold and aloof self. He reached out to tug his collar open and bent down, causing Bojo to pause. Her wrists were pressed down and the possibility of her escaping was slim. Bojo glanced sideways at the godly face. Brother Emo, MMH? What is it? Chin Mo's lips were right beside the youngster's ears, his voice deep and pleasant. Didn't you say it was sweet just now? His breath landed on the area above her neck. When it touched her skin, a numbing sensation surged out, causing Bojo to shiver. Chin Emo inched closer, his fingers pressing down on the youngster's restless long legs. He chuckled lightly. Not bad reaction. Bojo smiled, thinking about how to retaliate. Brother Emo, most people wouldn't act like this after a confession. You said it yourself, it's just a normal person. Chin Mo's eyes darkened when he saw the faint smile on the youngster's face. If it wasn't for the fact that there was a group of people eavesdropping outside, he would have torn her clothes apart. Once the thought came, it was hard to suppress it, especially for a man. In such matters he was too thin-skinned. His face and neck were flushed, even the back of his ears was a patch of pink. He had no choice but to retaliate. Bojo threw out a lead. The mastermind behind the Coke incident, Brother Emo, let go of me, I'll tell you. In your eyes, I'm such a useless person that I can't even find out who the mastermind is. Chin Emo inched closer to the youngster's neck, his thin lips landing. The cool touch made Bojo melt instantly. She knew that the Almighty had never been in a relationship. But how exactly did he get his skills? Did he specialize in attacking other people's weaknesses? Don't think about it. Chin Emo watched the youngster's watery eyes, dark and clear. He couldn't help lowering his lids, kissing the corner of her eyes. You were the one who started the fire. How could you have forgotten, MMH? Such a kiss was unbearable. It wasn't convenient for Bojio to move around. If she moved, there would be physical contact and her secret would be exposed. Brother Emo, you know I'm not gay. I'm gay because you're my best friend. And a pet. Chin Emo glanced up, pausing slightly. It's a pity I don't want to treat you as a good friend. No good friend would do such a thing. As for why you weren't gay before, that's because you hadn't met me. I remember you saying you like handsome men, Gio. With that, he lowered his voice. His cool breath was flirtatious, hitting the tip of her nose inch by inch. When he caressed her face, it seemed to have a bewitching effect. Even his uniform was pulled open, revealing his faintly discernible abs. The smooth lines made it hard for her to shift her gaze away. Aren't you tempted at all when you see me like this, MMH? It was as though he was born with such a demon, living in the depths of the deep sea. His voice elegant and luxurious. As long as he wanted to, he could seduce all the women in the world. Chin Emo was definitely one of them. His white shirt was half open, like a blood-sucking aristocrat. The aura of abstinence mixed with his mixed blood features. Regardless of whether it was in the esports arena or during their battle, he was always at the top. He was always within her reach. He was like a demon that could steal people's souls. Chapter 728. Before Bojio could pull herself away, she was pulled into the pleasure. He wasn't even 18 years old. Her body couldn't resist his seduction. She didn't have the ability to resist. Besides, that face reminded her of the first time she had pounced on her pet. Messy black hair, and a different pair of eyes. It wasn't a woman. Even a man wouldn't be able to escape. He knew she couldn't resist his seduction, but he still used this trick. Bojio raised her arms, circling Chin Mo's neck. Her lips inched closer, not hesitating at all. Chin Emo lifted his thin lips. The moment he kissed the corner of the youngster's lips, a sharp gust of wind blew. It was a beautiful capture and suppression. Their positions swapped. The youngster's arms were by Chin Mo's side, her gaze lowered. Brother Emo, you should know that even if I have a reaction, it's just a physical reaction. It doesn't mean anything. With that, Bojio lifted her hands, pulling Chin Mo's white shirt up. She wanted to stand up. Chin Emo held onto her wrist, his black hair falling down. He seemed to be smiling, but there was a hint of coldness in his voice. Why don't you have such a high resistance towards others? Bojio was aware of the Almighty's skills. If she were to reject such an Almighty, their relationship would fall to the freezing point. But she had to continue. Her identity as a girl would be exposed. But the Almighty had been trying to turn her gay. Shouldn't you take responsibility for flirting? When Chin Emo glanced up, he didn't give the person in front of him any chance to regret. He pressed the person's hand onto his burning hot spot. He watched as the youngster's face flushed red and her shoulders trembled. Chin Emo smiled again, looking as dangerous as a devil. His teeth were white and elegant. Didn't you say it was easy to touch, MMH? In the entire world, the Almighty was probably the only one who could behave like this. Even though he said it, his hands were doing that kind of movement. Bojio couldn't control the rising temperature on her face. Chin Emo arched a brow. Why aren't you being straightforward? Gio, men don't really care about this kind of thing. What do you think, especially good friends? Even good friends don't do such things. Bojio bit down on her lips, her ears turning red. She wanted to pull her hand away. However, Chin Emo wasn't willing. Even the heat of his breath was a little scorching. There was only the reflection of the youngster in his deep eyes. Is that so? It was a word that was not in his consciousness at all. But it made this man even more irresistible. It was a very strange feeling. Bojio had never experienced it before. He could control a person's breathing and even the look in their eyes. She could clearly see her own shadow swaying in that person's pupils. She could also see Chin Emo that no one else had ever seen before. That handsome face that could move one's heart was dyed with asterisk 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 at this moment. And when his black bangs hung down, it was even more sexy that it was difficult to pull away. Apart from the sounds that made people blush, there was also this person's aura and that scorching sensation. Bojo felt her palms burning hot. When he came back to his senses, he saw a pair of extremely black eyes. Your skills aren't that good. Chin Emo lifted the corner of his lips. You don't look like the legendary little prince of the nightclub. The only person who could dig up her dark history at this moment was the Almighty. Bojo wanted to avoid that person's aura, but she realized that the sandalwood scent could spread. She glanced over. You're just a nightclub nouveau riche. Chin Emo paused. He couldn't help but laugh, a certain part of him becoming more energetic. Do your job properly. Brother Emo. Do you confess like this to everyone you meet? Bojo was a lady after all. She couldn't handle it, her face turning redder. Chin Emo leaned towards the youngster's ear, his gaze as dark as the night. He said something that didn't seem like something he would say. Only you. Because I want you too much. I want to lock you up and do whatever I want to you. I want to hear your hoarse voice begging for mercy, or perhaps, like now. Bojo trembled when she felt the boiling heat. Her thin lips were kissed. Her breath seemed to have been snatched away. Her mind was blank. Her heartbeat was so loud it made her tremble. Bojo could feel the numbness rising from her tailbone. She felt like she had lost all her strength. It seems like you don't dislike me? That magnetic smile, accompanied by the kiss, brushed past her ear. There was also the lingering scent of musk and the steaming breath. Even the hand that was pressing down on her wrist began to move downwards. It brushed past her waist, followed by her abdomen, kissing through the uniform. Just as it was about to move to between her legs, Bojo widened her eyes in shock. A crisp slap. The dissonant sound rang out at this moment. It was extremely piercing. Chin Emo didn't look at the back of his hand that was red from the slap. Instead, he lowered his lids, looking at the youngster who was still flushed. Bojo replied, "Sorry, I don't need it." She stood up immediately. This time, besides her speed, Chin Emo paused when he heard the two words. This was the response he didn't want to hear the most. As a criminal psychologist, he knew when a man was the easiest to be flirted with. That was why he used such a method to turn a person gay. Chin Emo turned sideways and looked at the closed bathroom door. It was like a chasm that couldn't be crossed. The clear sound of water flowing could be heard. Bojo watched as the thing in her palms was washed away. She glanced up at herself in the mirror. After washing her hands with the hand sanitizer, she washed her face. Just a little more. Just a little more. The Almighty. Bojo pressed her head against the mirror, catching him off guard. If she had gone any further, her secret would have been exposed. Her thoughts were in a mess. Bojo knew very well that no one could make her do this. It was really messed up. But the Almighty thought she was a blue child. He even took the initiative to flirt with her. Bojo narrowed her eyes. This couldn't go on. She had to think of a way to turn him back. She had to turn him back. Bojo rubbed her brows, glancing at the cigarette and fire that the Almighty had placed in the bathroom. She pulled it out and lit one for herself. It was a handsome pose, the silver strands of hair falling down, contrasting with the smoke. Chin Emo thought the youngster wouldn't be able to accept what had just happened, and would hide in the bathroom. When he pushed the door open, he realized he was wrong. From his face, he didn't seem to be bothered by what had just happened. This was something Chin Emo had been interested in previously. But now his heart seemed to be pierced by something. The media that said he was cold-blooded should take a look at him. He was good to you, but he wasn't affected by you. Chin Emo didn't walk over. How long do you intend to stay here? Bojo averted her gaze, muttering, You have to give me some time to smoke after the deed. Chin Mo's chest was starting to hurt. When he heard those 3 words, it was really. He glanced at the youngster who didn't play by the rules. I'm the one who should smoke after the deed, not you. Bojo didn't reply, thinking that she would get back at him sooner or later, if she had the time. Chin Mo pulled her out. Explain to me, you're just a high school student. How did you know about the word after the deed? Aren't I a little nouveau riche from the nightclub? Bojo didn't like to smoke, but she did have one thing in mind. Brother Emo, don't do something like this again. Chin Mo's fingers paused, the light in his eyes dimming. Then he tilted his head and lit a cigarette. His actions were completely different from hers. It was just that there was not the slightest bit of smoke or fire aura around him. He was very cold. He wasn't talking. At this moment, someone knocked on the door. It was Lin Chuntao's voice. Hey, is little Spade asleep? Do you want to have another round? Bojo was glad that someone had come to break the ice. But she didn't want anyone to see the Almighty like this. She opened the door and was about to agree. But when she turned around, her gaze fell on that red streak. She turned around to ask Lin Chuntao about other matters. Lin Chuntao asked, "What do you want this for?" "I was selling coconuts at noon. My knee is injured. I need to apply some." Lin Chuntao shook his head. Soft skin and tender flesh. In reality, ever since Bojo had left, Chin Mo's mood had changed. The air in the room seemed to have been sucked out. Chin Mo reached out and buttoned his shirt back, one button at a time. But the longer he did, the colder his gaze became. It was so heavy that he looked as though he had been abandoned. What a ridiculous description. No one would have thought that Almighty Chin, who was adored by millions of fans, would be abandoned and rejected by someone. When he raised his head, there was no trace of emotion on his face. But the back of his hand was burning. He glanced over, realizing it was red. But the feeling didn't matter to Chin Mo. Because of the youngster's words. Brother Mo, don't do what you did today again. Chin Mo knew that the fact that she could say such words so calmly meant that she really didn't like him. Perhaps she was against it. Chin Mo's fingers tightened. His black hair fluttered in the wind, making it hard to see his expression. The night sky outside the hotel was dark. It was so dark that no one knew what was happening. Vaguely, she could hear a very pleasant bass voice. Chapter 729. Wait a minute. He seemed to have sensed the commotion nearby. He turned and hid in the corridor, his back pressed against the wall as he watched the two of them with his dark eyes. It doesn't seem convenient for you to speak there. It's really inconvenient. There are cameras everywhere in this show. The man chuckled and wanted to say something. However, for some reason, the young man who was walking away suddenly stopped and lifted his eyes to look in his direction. What is it? Lin Chuntao arched a brow. Bojo took a step back. Hey, little Spade, I'm talking to you, what is it? Lin Chuntao asked. Bojo's gaze deepened as she lifted her thin lips. Nothing, my eyes were blurry just now. Tell me, did your eyes get myopic from all the gaming? You're so paranoid. Lin Chuntao said before he could finish his sentence. Bojo stuffed a hand into her pocket, a light smile on her lips. Just treat it as me being paranoid. There seems to be someone. She hadn't seen wrongly, the figure that had flashed by. But it was strange. Why had he avoided them? Then he paced over there. It was empty. Lin Chuntao patted her shoulders. What do you mean you must have seen wrongly? MMH. Bojo ran her fingers over the wall, her gaze deepening because of the yellow sand. Besides, there were footprints on the floor. Even though it was faint, no one had said such a thing. She wouldn't believe it. Besides, he was wearing the team uniform. Clearly, everyone here and everyone's uniform was different. For instance, she and the Almighty were both from Supreme Alliance. The other two were the same. What exactly was his secret? Why was he avoiding them? Bojo glanced up, glancing at the naive Lin Chuntao. Let's go get the Yunnan spray. Let's go, let's go. I thought something was wrong with your reaction. Let me tell you, we were playing the escape room earlier. In order to protect you, I've been enduring the terrifying visual impact. Now my mind is especially sensitive. You really can't provoke me anymore. Be careful that I don't faint in front of you. Lin Chuntao said shamelessly. Bojo arched a brow. Then I have to thank you for your protection. Sure. The noisy voices became softer and softer as the two of them left. What's wrong? The ringing on the phone pulled the man's attention back. After the youngster was far away, the man walked out of the darkness with his phone in hand. His eyes were dark. Nothing, I was almost discovered. Discovered? The person on the other end of the phone stopped typing. It's just a misunderstanding. The man looked up, and all the light shone on his face. The gentle outline of his chiseled facial features. Every smile carrying a sense of leisure. Who else could it be other than the recently returned Rao Rong? Be careful, especially when facing Chin Mo. Don't be careless. Rao Rong lifted the corners of his lips. I'm no longer who I used to be. Of course I know how to deal with it. That's good. You can go now. It's time for us to make a comeback. He pressed the spacebar. A faint Z shape appeared in the man's eyes. Rao Rong lowered his lids. It seems like you have thought of a way to deal with Chin Mo. But who exactly spoiled our plans during the maiden's sacrifice? She actually didn't take action just because of your hypnosis and incitement online. I'm still investigating. His fingers paused. Rao Rong arched a brow. Honestly, I thought you were the one who started the live stream to let everyone see how much the world needs to be destroyed. I never expected it to be you. Regardless of who it was, the person who spoiled our maiden's sacrifice won't be able to escape. Do you think I won't be able to find that person with my abilities? Rao Rong chuckled lightly. I didn't mean it that way. I still believe in your hacking skills. Alright, the banquet is about to start. It's time for the person at the top of the pyramid to have a taste of being stepped on. Besides, there's something we can use against Chin Mo. What is it? Rao Rong leaned against the wall, his lips still curved. From afar he looked harmless and handsome. The new MVP, the vice captain of Supreme Alliance. Chin Mo cares about him. The other party listened to the information while searching for the youngster's information. With a laugh he said, Fujio, an eldest son chased out by his family, a useless person who doesn't know anything other than gaming. Why do you think Chin Mo cares about such a person? You will have to ask Chin Mo about that. Rao Rong's gaze was as dark as the night. I'm just telling you that this person holds a special place in Chin Mo's heart. Perhaps it's because of his gaming skills. The voice on the other end turned cold. If that's the case, it seems like we really have to meet him. Let's see what's so worthy of Chin Mo's efforts. There's a camera in front, I'm hanging up. Rao Rong watched as the person ran towards him, keeping his phone calmly, stuffing a hand into his pocket. The storyboard director finally slowed down when she saw him, heaving a sigh of relief. Almighty Rao, I finally found you. I thought I lost you. Where exactly did you go? I've been searching the entire floor. I was hungry, so I came out to find something to eat. I never expected the hotel to be so huge. You should know I have a poor sense of direction. Rao Rong chuckled lightly. Where's Lin Chentao? Didn't you say you were going to form a team? The storyboard director's attention was instantly diverted. That's right, where's Almighty Lin? Where did he run off to? Rao Rong didn't tell her where they had disappeared to. In fact, there were times when he didn't want to face a certain someone. Especially after his return. The hotel hadn't provided any medication. But there were fans outside. He needed someone to divert their attention. Almighty Lin, do you want to prove how handsome you are? Bojo asked with a smile as she watched the scene outside. Lin Chentao was smart. I said, don't even think about throwing me out. I'm afraid the fans will faint from happiness. I'm not going out. Do you see that floor-to-ceiling window? Sit there and play a game. I'll help you count the number of people who took your photo and make a record. How's that? When Bojo wanted to convince someone, she had to cater to their interests. Lin Chentao wavered. Bojo continued. The main point is to tell Almighty Fatty that he isn't the most handsome person in the esports industry. You are. Do you really think so? Lin Chentao's eyes lit up. It seems like I'm really more handsome than Chin Mo. Bojo smiled faintly. Of course. Of course he couldn't be compared to the Almighty. Little Spade, you have such good taste, it's worth it to teach your brother. Lin Chentao walked towards the window. Where should I sit? I have to let them take a photo of my side profile. It's the most handsome and deep. That's how I became the coldest assassin. Bojo scanned her surroundings casually, multitasking. Over there, move slightly to the left. That's right, sit down and don't move for a minute. They are already raising their phones to take a photo of you. Pay attention to your expression. Lin Chuntao was indeed stylish, his fair skin, single eyelids and high nose bridge as he stood sideways. The fans outside the hotel immediately crowded over when they saw him. The youngster made use of this opening to take a step back, removing the receptionist's cap and placing it on his head. Bojio's movements were swift. But it wasn't just fast. More importantly, every move she made was when the attention of others was elsewhere. His movements were as smooth as flowing water, extremely handsome. When she walked out of the hotel, she seemed to have transformed into a completely different person. Just like a magician, she walked towards the east. Lin Chuntao was still nagging. Little Spade, say something, how's my pose? Would it be more handsome if I lowered my head or... F***ck, where is he? Lin Chuntao glanced left and right, but there wasn't any trace of the youngster. In reality, Bojio hadn't gone anywhere. She had hailed a cab to buy some pepper spray from the pharmacy before rushing back. She made good use of her time. On the other hand, Lin Chuntao's hair stood on end as though someone had stepped on his tail. It didn't take more than 10 minutes. With the help of Lin Chuntao, the Almighty, she had diverted his attention. Bojio didn't have to be deliberate when she returned. Wearing a receptionist's hat, she walked past the door, and even helped someone park a car. None of the fans recognized the person in front of them as Spadesy. After entering the hotel lobby, with a flip of her hand, she returned the cap to the receptionist who had lowered his head and walked towards Lin Chuntao. Nasi was still sending messages in the group chat. Guess what little Spade did? Beat you? Good job. This was the reply of the most handsome on earth fatty. Lin Chuntao said, shut up, he left me alone to face a group of fans. I'm worried that they will rush into the hotel and pounce on me. Since it's so difficult to stay here, you can leave. Lin Chuntao replied, no, I want to enjoy the feeling of being the center of attention for a while longer. The most handsome fatty in the world. Shameless. If you are so capable, tell me your coordinates. I will experience it with you. He's downstairs. Hurry up and come down. Lin Chuntao raised his head and saw the young man smiling at him. The fans outside the floor-to-ceiling windows shrieked when they saw Bojio. Lin Chuntao was about to retort when he noticed the Yunnan Baiyao spray in the youngster's hands. Where did you get this? Of course it's for sale. In order not to let the Almighty know she had been out, Bojio tidied her clothes. Lin Chuntao pointed at the fans outside before pointing at the youngster's face, his mouth agape. You can go out like this? You don't understand the skills of a bookworm. Bojio confirmed her appearance before arching a brow. Back to the room? Lin Chuntao lowered his head. I have an appointment with Sampang, I can't miss it. He wasn't going to admit that he was reluctant to part with the current situation. Bojio glanced out the window before breaking into a smile. I'll head up myself, have fun. Don't go, my captain might be coming down in a while. Let's play together and familiarize ourselves with each other's moves. You haven't played against him before. Do you remember the previous match? Lin Chuntao was clearly different from his usual self. You were injured that day, but little Spade, if Captain was around, we would have won even if you weren't injured. The outcome would always be the same. Bojio paused, her voice calm. You seem to have forgotten that our captain wasn't around that match. Lin Chuntao fell silent, his mouth agape and dumbfounded. Bojio glanced at him. How much do you know about your captain? In the entire esports world, who doesn't know that my captain loves me the most? Bojio didn't have to listen to the rest of the sentence since it wasn't going to be useful information. Just as she was about to leave, she heard his cool voice. I've been waiting for him to come back and now he's finally here. Bojio glanced back, into the pair of bright eyes. Little Spade, I'll show you my true ability in the National League. Bojio chuckled. I'll be waiting. F***ck, I'll be the one waiting. Don't forget, Supreme Alliance still has to revive. Bojio heard the commotion behind her, waving her hands with her back facing him. With his tall and slender figure, even Lin Chuntao felt that it wasn't without reason that so many people liked him. This was an era where looks were important. That's right. But there were doubts. Bojio wasn't prepared to say it out loud. There were two types of people she didn't want to interact with. One was the Almighty, who was filled with righteousness and wouldn't be affected by evil. Even if there was a black fog around him, it wouldn't touch him. The other type was Lin Chuntao. Even his eyes were burning with hot blood. Just like the members of Supreme Alliance. That was how they should be. Shining in the esports arena. Even if one day, their age and skills couldn't keep up and they became one of the masses. There were also people who couldn't help but recall their youth that had been burned by fire the moment they saw them. Bojo glanced down at the spray in her hands. After the National League, once it was over, she would give the Almighty an answer. Because she hadn't had such a past, she wanted to have it. Even though she knew deep down that she didn't deserve such innocence after falling into darkness, she still couldn't control herself. She still remembered when she was young. She hugged her favorite little keyboard, watching her mother's grave, the pastor singing. Everything seemed to be very peaceful. Her father's expression when he lowered his lids. Once a person loses someone important to them, they will become very unhappy. Gio, when you grow up, you must find someone who is very important to you. Do you understand? She lifted her head, confused. But didn't Dad say that as a qualified hacker, I can't tell anyone about my identity? Does Mom know about Dad's identity? What do you think? We're all adults like this. When they encountered a question that was hard to answer, they would ask a rhetorical question. She shook her head. Someone who really cares about you, even if she knows something about you, she will pretend not to know. There are too many hackers in this world. They only operate on the internet. In real life, they might be a bank clerk, a teacher, or even a teenager. You should know that you are the youngest among all the hackers. Daddy said that I'm too handsome. There's nothing I can do. Ha 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 ha, that's right. You're too handsome. You should still remember the hacker's rules. I've memorized them all. The first one. I won't steal anyone's assets on the internet. Whoever you want to deal with, just say it. The last one. Hackers don't just attack users. Instead, they study vulnerabilities through attacks, thereby greatly increasing the security of the system. Looks like our little nine's memory is indeed not bad. Aha, Dad, don't you think we should add one more? Oh, add what? A hacker who is not handsome is not a good hacker. Ha ha ha, for the Bo family, we can add that. Dad, are we really leaving? I can't bear to part with your little friend. He's my pet, can't I bring him along? I have the money to support him. He has the money too. Alright, can I write him a letter before I leave? He might not be able to understand your handwriting, it's too ugly. I'll draw a picture. We have always had Lin Shi in our hearts. That's called telepathy. You really should learn Chinese. Do you remember what I told you? You aren't just the heir of the Bo family. All hackers have to abide by the rules. If anyone doesn't follow the rules, you will be the one to clean them up. If anyone tries to harm a hacker, you have to stand up immediately. Gio, you can have important people but not friends. You have to remember, you are the young master of the hacker world. Bojo retracted her memory. She was already in front of the door. The storyboard director was standing outside. Big Spade, you're finally back. Even though she was standing in the corridor, she could feel the cold air in the room. It wasn't a good feeling. It's getting late. Go back to sleep. Bojo laughed lightly. Don't worry, when I wake up in the middle of the night, I'll expose one of the cameras for you to capture the Almighty's beauty. The storyboard director replied immediately. It's for the two of you. No problem. Bojo pushed the door open and entered. She wondered how many cigarettes he had smoked. But there was a hint of indifference in his handsome face. His posture could be taken out without any fear. She recalled the way the Almighty had seduced her. That should have been the first time he had lowered himself. She knew very well that after being rejected like that, no one would be in a good mood. Chin Mo glanced up, reaching out to extinguish the cigarette. I thought you weren't coming back. You left so quickly. Other than being unable to accept it, you must have felt disgusted, right? No. Bojo was quick to deny this point. She felt that it wasn't right. The Almighty wouldn't believe her. After all, her reaction had been too huge. She used the Yunnan Baiyao as evidence. I bought this for Brother Mo. Chin Mo stilled. He had thought of many ways to reply, But this was the only one he hadn't thought of. Bojo didn't waste any time, grabbing his wrist and lowering her head to spray the redness on the back of his hand. Honestly, her actions weren't gentle at all. She was reminded of how gentle the Almighty had been when he had helped her blow dry her eyes and apply lipstick. As expected, her pet was still better at such things. Her actions were gentler. She had already finished spraying. Bojo seemed to recall something, leaning over suavely to blow on the back of his hand. Really, there wasn't a single bit of order. She didn't even know how to take care of others. Chin-mo watched the youngster's actions, feeling a sense of familiarity. It seemed like a long time ago, when he had been because of this thought. A great pain attacked his brain, and even his temples hurt unbearably. That pain. Chin-mo pressed down on his head. Bojo wasn't sure what had gone wrong. She had never seen Chin-mo in this state before. His usually pale lips were frighteningly pale, much less his actions. Brother Mo. Bojo panicked. It was just like when they were young. She had cooked a meal and he hadn't wanted to eat it. But later, for some unknown reason, while talking about her, he ate all the food, and after a while he became like this. That was the first time Bojo had felt fear. And at this moment, that fear had returned. Chin-mo held onto her wrist, his gaze deep. What are you panicking about? I'm fine. Indeed, it wasn't the same as before. But the thin layer of sweat on his forehead proved how painful it had been. His face was still pale, without a single trace of blood. Bojo thought to herself, this wasn't much different from when she had come to visit her relatives. It must have been unbearable. But she couldn't share her experience with the Almighty. Bojo stood up and took a bottle of mineral water, opening it for Chin-mo. After Chin-mo took a sip, his eyes lit up. Bojo asked, Brother Mo, what happened just now? Do you do this often? This is the first time. Chin-mo seemed to be thinking about something. His gaze swept past the youngster's side profile. Some images that he had never seen before flashed across his mind. He couldn't grasp them clearly, but he knew that the images were of himself when he was young. As a criminal psychologist, Chin-mo quickly realized that this wasn't normal. In the past, he hadn't taken his grandfather's words to heart. For example, when he was 4 to 6 years old. He didn't think much of it when he didn't remember it. But now, when it barged into his mind like this, Chin-mo realized a problem. He should be missing some of his memories. He glanced sideways at the youngster who was still sizing him up. The back of his hand seemed to have turned redder after being taken care by the youngster. I'll get some ice. Bojo arched a brow. She was smart enough to realize that it wasn't normal to have a headache. But there were some things that they didn't say. It seemed to have become a tacit understanding between them. There's no need, Chin-mo said. Bojo wouldn't listen. This time, she brought the ice over and kicked the stool away. It wasn't cute at all. Sometimes, Chin-mo wondered what he liked about her. Chapter 730. Bojo glanced up at the Almighty's expression. Besides his handsome face, there didn't seem to be any negative emotions. Did that mean he had forgiven her? Bojo moved the ice away, lowering her head to spray the Yunnan Baiyao spray onto the back of his hand. She looked so serious that those who didn't know would think she was in the middle of a major operation. Chin-mo smiled, his chin dangling close to the youngster's head. He lowered his lids, his pale lips touching the furry vortex. That image, whether it was the posture or the feeling, it was very beautiful. If it wasn't for the fact that the internal camera was covered, the chief director would have lost his cool when he saw this scene from the front of the camera. It was a pity that not all scenes of true love would appear on the show, because there were always people from the production team around. The time when every team really went to sleep was not very early. At 1 a.m., all the lights in the room were switched off. It wasn't possible for Bojo to be unprepared for sleeping in the same room as the Almighty. Hence, she had a light sleep, only falling asleep at around 3 a.m. The next time she woke up, she was jolted awake by the light. She didn't know when she had gotten so close to the Almighty. A corner of the camera was exposed, facing her and the Almighty's faces. Bojo rubbed her eyes. Without a second thought, she covered the camera, leaned back, and continued to sleep. The production crew. Didn't they agree to expose a camera for them to capture the Almighty's beauty? That's good enough. The storyboard director consoled her colleague. Cut that scene and put it into the main film. It will definitely make the handsome fans bleed. The little assistant coughed. That little bit of broth isn't going to be enough. What else can we do? The storyboard director reminded them. Have you forgotten about the guest guessing and the secret room challenge? Be careful that Almighty Chin and Big Spade don't expose the suspense in front of the entire nation. With that, the production crew thought about the day's events, leaving silently. Should we call them later? They have to wake up at 6 a.m. to continue filming. I heard that Almighty Chin doesn't like to be disturbed. Who told you that? Big Uncle is at the Chin group. I just told him that Almighty Chin is coming to our show. He's such a reliable person that he almost jumped up. He even specifically told me that Almighty Chin doesn't like to chat, and doesn't like to have other people around during breaks. He told me to take it easy even if I'm doing a show. Don't worry, Big Spade is here. Wake him up and get him to call Almighty Chin. It feels like Big Spade saved the entire crew. Everyone looked at each other in dismay. 6 in the morning. The sun had not fully shone in yet. Because of the phone's vibration, the youngster stretched out her fair arm. Her eyes were still closed, and her voice was lazy and nasally. Who is it? One word. The little assistant's heart skipped a beat. It's the production crew. It's time for the mission. It's time to wake up. Also, I'll leave the responsibility of waking the Almighty up to you. Big Spade, please, please. The voice on the other end of the phone caused Bojo to open her eyes. She glanced sideways at the person on her right. The thin rays of sunlight shone in, shining on the handsome and elegant face. His mixed blood features were clearly visible. His collarbone and arms were exposed outside the pure white blanket. Even his shoulders were perfect. Immersing. This was the appearance of a puppy. It was better not to let anyone see it. Boju lifted the blanket, her fair feet stepping onto the wooden floor. She was still holding the phone in her hand. Okay. Then she placed the phone in her pocket. It wasn't safe to take a shower at this time. She still had to change her clothes. She quickly changed in the bathroom. Bojo glanced at Chin Mo on the bed. In the end, she still found him too handsome. Just as she was about to go closer, she heard his low and deep voice. It had the magnetism of a person who had just woken up. Why are you so close to me? Bojo paused. Why did he wake up at this time? Even if she wanted to do something naughty, she couldn't. Chin Mo watched the youngster's slightly depressed face. He lifted the blanket and stood up. He was wearing black trousers and a pair of straight legs. His upper body wasn't wearing any clothes. The oppressive aura was stronger than usual. Bojo took a step back. Chin Mo didn't say anything, but his next action confused her. He pulled her into the bathroom. Then the Almighty released her hand and unzipped his zipper. Bojo's eyes widened. Brother Mo, what are you doing? Didn't you see it? You're going easy on me. Chin Mo didn't stop. He looked so handsome. He looked handsome just by going easy on her. Only the Almighty could do that. But why was he going easy on her in front of her? Bojo narrowed her eyes. On the other side, Chin Mo arched a brow and said nonchalantly, Why? Didn't you say that good friends would go easy on each other the first time we met? Bojo laughed. Brother Mo, you have a good memory. I'm better than the wall-climbing student. Chin Mo pulled his zipper up, looking handsome. He glanced over, his voice calm. It's your turn. Any other girl would have blushed at the Almighty's actions. I can't pee. I came to the toilet just now. Chin Mo glanced at the youngster, brushing past her, his voice slow. Don't worry. I won't touch you before you get used to it. Get used to it. Bojo wondered how she could get used to it. Chin Mo seemed to have read her mind. I'll bring you along when I pee so you can watch a few more times. That way, your hands won't tremble the next time. Bojo. When it came to such matters, Bojo wouldn't be able to take advantage of him. Besides, the Almighty had always been a man of his word. Perhaps he would bring her along every time he went to the toilet. Once again, Bojo felt that the variety show was a huge trap Fong Yi had dug for her. Compared to the other two teams, Bojo and Chin Mo were much more efficient. In the other room, Rao Rong watched the youngster lying on the bed, hugging a pillow. He suppressed his patience, lowering his voice. Lin Chuntao, wake up. That guy acted as if he hadn't heard anything, and turned over to continue sleeping. Who was the one who jumped up and down last night, and said to wake him up early the next day? In the end, he had already woken up half an hour ago. He woke this guy up again. Rao Rong chuckled. The temperature was a little cold. He took a bottle of mineral water, and poured it towards the man's face, unafraid of the cameras. Lin Chuntao was startled by the cold and cursed out loud. When he realized who was standing in front of him, he wiped away the water on his face and smiled, revealing his white teeth. Captain is really back. I wasn't dreaming. If I'm still here after sleeping for a day, then it must be real. After listening to that guy's unconscious words, Rao Rong's expression froze. But soon he turned his back and didn't let the camera capture his face again. Did this guy really want him to come back? Rao Rong glanced sideways, glancing at the guy who was still hugging the pillow and mumbling to himself. His gaze deepened. When the three teams gathered together, Zhao Sampang was still swaying back and forth. The crew knew it was too early to start the mission, but they had no choice as they were worried that more fans would appear and affect the filming. Hence, the earlier they started filming, the better. Fortunately, the duration of the show was almost up and the mission was full of explosive news. They just had to head to the last location, and the episode would come to a perfect end. It's 8:10 now. We will reach our destination in an hour. Everyone take a break. At this time, the filming was targeted. After all, they had just woken up, so everyone's enthusiasm for filming was not very high. Ever since they had boarded the car, Bojio hadn't opened her eyes. Chin Mo sat beside the youngster. Both of them were competing in terms of sleeping skills. In the end, in the image of the camera, the two of them were leaning against each other. Their hair was of different colors, but they were equally handsome. Of course, the youngster's head was slightly lowered, but that didn't affect the storyboard director's excitement. Along the way, almost all the guests had fallen asleep. Weibo was the first to wake up. In other words, ever since they posted the news yesterday, the commotion on Weibo had not subsided. A lot of people went to the production team's official Weibo to leave a message, wanting to see the photos and whether they could sell them to him. Due to the huge popularity, coupled with the fact that there were a lot of illegitimate fans following him everywhere, the production team decided to make a last-minute decision. They told some fans through their official Weibo that the final filming location would be at Linqing University. They told them to be careful and not to act blindly. This way, at the very least, the information would be transparent, and no one would use this point to lie about revealing someone's whereabouts. After seeing the news sent by the program team, the fans really exploded on the spot. Lin City's fans in particular were extremely excited. Everything he did before had nothing to do with esports. That mission, on the other hand, could not be separated from esports, because the mission location was an internet cafe near the university town. He wanted them to walk around the internet cafe and see how many people would understand what esports was like. When it was nearing afternoon, the filming was finally completed. The area outside was filled with fans. After watching Bojio and the others leave, the storyboard director laughed, turning towards the cameraman at the side. Wait and see, after the broadcast, they will all be extremely popular, especially Spadesy. As though to verify their reaction when they first saw Spadesy, the youngsters' fans were increasing at a visible speed. Even the station had sent an urgent notice, asking them to complete the post-production overnight and broadcast it a week in advance. Those who knew how to advertise knew what it meant to warm up. But this time, there wasn't a need to warm up at all. There were explosions everywhere. In fact, even the storyboard director hadn't expected the video to be so interesting after it was completed. From the youngsters' diss of the production team to meeting up with the Almighty and a series of subsequent actions, the passers-by started to turn into fans. Even those who didn't understand esports started to ask who the silver-haired hunk in the program was. Spadesy's fans continued to increase. Even though it wasn't as many as Chin Mo's, it was slowly becoming the most popular. When the program was nearing its end, it left people yearning for more. especially when the youngster had just woken up and rubbed his eyes, not forgetting to cover the camera. It was so adorable. Of course, that wasn't the main point. The main point was that the youngster had slept beside Almighty Qin. Countless fans took screenshots of that scene and used it as the background. It was so sweet. Especially when they were sleeping. The youngster's head was leaning against the Almighty's shoulder. Both of them had their eyes closed, their lashes long and handsome. A fan commented, "They are the best brothers in Supreme Alliance. When one of them isn't around, the other will definitely shoulder everything for him. Their faith is stronger than their relationship." He has an indifferent personality, and became an almighty at such a young age. Yet he is able to entrust his back to him. Even when they sleep together, they seem like two well-matched princes. That is Emojio. She read the comment. Countless people left comments and reposted it. The relationship between princes is the most enviable. My almighty slept with my second almighty, what should I do? Alright, he's so handsome. I can only give him my blessings. I hope they will never change, and will always be together. After this program, the CP fans were even more enthusiastic about searching for the pink photos of Almighty Qin and the youngster. The more they searched, the more they felt that even their gaze was full of gay love. Will I tell you that when I saw Almighty Qin suddenly lowering his head to complete the task with Big Spade through a piece of paper, I blushed? My mom was right next to me and asked me what was wrong. How should I tell her that the two people I like the most are finally together, and they are kissing each other so openly? I can't stop thinking about it. Let me be excited for a while. That scene caused a wave of excitement. The fans were also mischievous. I just want to ask Almighty Qin if he dares to kiss Big Spade without a piece of paper, and directly kiss him. Like the program crew, the perfect CP Almighty assists. Based on my understanding of Almighty Qin, no one can force him to do something he doesn't want to do. Could it be that he doesn't resist being close to Big Spade from the bottom of his heart? Not only does he not resist, he is also declaring his sovereignty the whole time. Am I the only one who feels this way? I think the same as the one above. Also, did you see my Big Spade? He is so obedient in front of Almighty Qin. Also, how is this child so strong? He pushed a whole cart of coconuts by himself while the Almighty walked beside him leisurely. Big Spade even looked happy and didn't feel like he was at a disadvantage. What a dumb son of a landlord. The main thing is that when Big Spade woke up, he looked at the Almighty and then at the camera. At the end he raised his hand. That expression of not knowing where he was so handsome and cute. He is even cuter when he is obediently beside Almighty Qin, like a little loyal dog. The more heated the discussion online, the darker Wu Zhen's eyes became in front of the computer. The more she watched, the more resentment she felt. Until she saw the kissing scene at the end. Wu Zhen raised her hand and with a forceful swing, the mouse and keyboard fell to the ground. Why? Why was she in such a miserable state now? That youngster could participate in the variety show with Brother Mo. Now, not only was she banished from the crime squad forever, she couldn't even see Old Master in anymore. The Wu family had a lot of money and could let her do many things. She could even go overseas to develop her career. But Wu Zhen had never thought of letting this matter go. No matter how far she went, she had to maintain her outward appearance. This had always been her creed. She took a deep breath and stood up as well. She called for the servants to come up and tidy up. Miss, someone wants to see you. The Wu family's butler was much calmer than the servants. Even though there were so many broken things on the ground, he didn't have much of an expression. Wu Zhen glanced at him. I won't be seeing anyone for a while. Everything was gone, she couldn't accept it at all. The person said she came from the Fu Corporation, and wants to talk to you about Fujio alone. She believes that you will be very interested. Wu Zhen's eyes lit up when she heard that. Let her in. Yes, Mississippi. Less than 3 minutes later, a person appeared in the Wu family's living room. That person seemed to be in a bad mood recently, so she had to pay attention to her appearance. But now, she didn't have the money to pay attention to her appearance. But the marks on her eyebrows were still there. If she wasn't the mistress who interfered with Fu Zhongyi and He Honghua, who else could it be? You are? Wu Zhen hadn't seen her before. In Wu Zhen's heart, even rich people had their own circles. Be it her or brother Mo. The person in front of them was nothing in their eyes. Su Mei naturally lowered her stance in front of Wu Zhen. Miss Wu, you must have forgotten that we attended an evening party. There were many people in the circle then, so my husband and I could only watch from afar. Fu Zhongyi. Wu Zhen lifted her eyes when she heard the name. Wasn't he the father of that glass man? Su Mei. Yes, I know Miss Wu has met with some trouble recently. Because of the same person, I can't enter the company and my son's esports career is ruined because of him. Even if I go to hell, I will drag Fujio down with me. I believe Miss Wu feels the same. Wu Zhen arched a brow. No one in this world has the ability to drag me down to hell. Of course, I'm just making an analogy. Su Mei was indeed someone who had been in the business world for a long time. She was very perceptive when it came to catching someone's attention. But I have a piece of news that I got a private detective to investigate a long time ago. He said that Fujio's birth has a secret that he Honghua has been trying to cover up. As for what the secret is, I will need Miss Wu's help to find out. That's why I'm here today, to see if Miss Wu is interested in helping me deal with that person who should have gone to hell a long time ago. A secret at birth? What kind of secret do you think it is? Wu Zhen was obviously interested in this suggestion. Su Mei didn't give in. I will tell Miss Wu about this when we reach He Honghua's hometown. Don't worry, Miss Wu. I want that person to have a taste of falling into the abyss just like you. This secret is enough to ruin Fujio's reputation. He won't even be able to participate in esports competitions. Okay. Wu Zhen's eyes were full of venom. She had to admit that Su Mei's words struck a chord in her heart. Moreover, she knew very well that the enemy of her enemy could become a partner. People like Su Mei were still too young to use her. Wait until she knew what the secret was. She would kick this middle-aged woman away. Did she really think that she could use the Wu family as she pleased? The sky was changing outside. The only thing that didn't change was the popularity on Weibo. There were less than 2 days left until the revival match. But the fans' minds weren't on this. It was so sweet that they didn't know what to do. That show was too popular. It was the first time that a variety show invited esports players as guests. So the audience wasn't just fans. There was also the Sakura Stream team that had settled down here and was preparing to participate in the National League. These people don't look too bad. Looks are just for show, the competition isn't about that. Is that so? But I remember that you lost to these people on the Japanese server. What? It's them? One of them was short, a baby-faced blonde. The moment he heard this, he immediately went onto the television, his face pressed against the screen. Which one? Which one beat me the last time? The one lying on the sofa was also a handsome man. But he wasn't the same as the one from China. He arched a brow and pointed casually. This one is especially talkative. And that silver-haired handsome youngster, rumor has it that he became the first clear king of a region the moment he started playing. He even beat someone in Tokyo. It wasn't an injustice for you to lose to him. The baby-faced man glanced towards the screen, his finger pointing at Bojio's figure. Him. Uh-huh. The baby-faced man pouted. Just because he's older than me. That was true. The baby-faced man was the youngest member of Sakura Stream team. He hadn't even graduated from junior high school and had become an official member. His ability wasn't just for show. His weakness was underestimating his opponent. Vice Captain, what do you think of this Spadesy? Mei Nan, who was lying on the sofa, turned around and asked the man who looked like he would never wake up. He was yawning, holding a comic book in his hand as he sat on the wooden floor. His eyes were clear. What? It's useless to ask Vice Captain. When has he ever cared about the other team members? The baby-faced man wanted an answer in his heart, so he jumped over and pointed at the screen. Vice Captain, that one, the silver-haired one, what do you think of him? Hoshino glanced up, looking lazily at the direction he was pointing at. At this moment, the youngster on the screen happened to be in the secret room escape stage. Because of his extremely handsome skills, the scene that caused countless Spade Z fans to scream was reflected in Hoshino's eyes. But it was different from the others. Hoshino didn't just see his handsomeness. It was his brows, his light smile. The evil that could destroy everything between his lips. His movements were as smooth as flowing water. A gaze that couldn't be more familiar. You're tuning in to the Echoes of the Heart YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.